September 7th, 1935. 10:47 p.m. Palace Chop House, Newark, New Jersey. Dutch Schultz, the most violent mobster in America, sat bleeding from 5 bullet holes. The man who'd murdered over 100 people, who'd terrorized an entire city, was dying. And his last words? 3 names. 2 men, 1 woman. Pause. The woman's name made the detectives go silent, because she wasn't supposed to exist. No photographs, no arrest records, no official documentation. But every mobster in New York knew her. Every dirty cop paid her. Every politician feared her. Madame Stephanie St. Clair, the woman who made Bumpy Johnson beg, the woman who declared war on Dutch Schultz and won, and what she did after his death. That's the part they erased from history. Until now, drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. And tell me if you've ever heard the name Stephanie St. Clair before tonight. Because what you're about to learn will change everything you thought you knew about Harlem, about power, and about who really controlled New York's underworld in 1935. Harlem, while Al Capone was drowning Chicago in blood and Tommy guns, a 5-foot-tall Caribbean woman was doing something far more dangerous. She was making white men ask permission. Stephanie St. Clair pulled in $200,000 every single week. That's $4 million in today's money. Every week. From an illegal lottery called the Numbers Racket. Poor folks bet pennies. Stephanie paid out winnings the police couldn't touch. And she did it without firing a single shot. Because Stephanie didn't need guns. She had something better. Files. Ledgers. Names. Addresses. Bank accounts. Every dirty cop who took a bribe, every politician who skimmed campaign funds, every judge who fixed a case. She had it all written down, locked away, ready to detonate. Born in Martinique, immigrated to Harlem in 1912 with $10 and a suitcase. By 1928, she owned 42 numbers banks across Manhattan. She called herself Madam Queen, and Harlem called her Queenie, not because she demanded it, because she earned it. Her operation ran like Swiss clockwork. Runners collected bets every morning. Numbers drawn every afternoon. Payouts delivered by sunset. No delays. No excuses. No mistakes. You steal from Queenie, you disappear. You lie to Queenie, you lose your job and your reputation. You betray Queenie, pause. Nobody was stupid enough to try twice. But here's what made her untouchable. She didn't just run numbers. She ran information. And in 1929, she was about to meet a young man who understood that power better than anyone, a man who would become a legend. But first, he had to prove himself to her. August 1929, 133rd Street. A 24-year-old ex-convict named Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson walked into Stephanie St. Clair's counting house. He'd just been released from Sing Sing, armed robbery, 5 years served. No job, no money, no prospects. But Bumpy had something Stephanie recognized immediately. Intelligence, not street smarts. Actual intelligence, the kind that comes from reading books in prison. Shakespeare, Sun Tzu, Marcus Aurelius, the kind that made him dangerous. She hired him on the spot, not as muscle, as her enforcer. There's a difference. Muscle breaks bones. Enforcers break systems. Stephanie taught Bumpy everything. How to read people. How to leverage information. How to make politicians need you more than you need them. How to turn enemies into assets without them realizing it. How to control Harlem without Harlem knowing it was being controlled. And Bumpy learned fast. Too fast. By 1931, he was running her protection network. By 1932, he was negotiating with Tammany Hall politicians on her behalf. By 1933, he was the second most powerful person in Harlem, and the first was still Stephanie St. Clair. Their relationship wasn't romantic. It was something rarer, mutual respect. In 1930s America, a black woman running a criminal empire, teaching a black man how to think like a general, that wasn't supposed to exist. But it did, and it worked, until it didn't. Because in early 1931, a psychopath from the Bronx looked south toward Harlem, saw all that number's money flowing through Stephanie's hands, and decided he wanted it. All of it. His name was Arthur Flegenheimer, but the world knew him as Dutch Schultz, the most violent gangster in New York, the man who'd killed over 100 people, the man who tortured rivals with ice picks and blowtorches, the man who one-shot a tax attorney in the face during a business meeting just to make a point. And Dutch Schultz had just made a decision. Take Harlem. Destroy Stephanie St. Clair. And if Bumpy Johnson got in the way, kill him too. What Dutch didn't know was that Stephanie St. Clair had been preparing for this war her entire life. And when it started, Harlem would never be the same. We now know who Stephanie is, who Bumpy is, and why Dutch Schultz is a threat. What happens when the most violent man in America goes to war with the smartest woman in Harlem? January 1931. Dutch Schultz wasn't just violent. He was medically insane. The man once tied a rival to a chair, broke every finger with a ball-peen hammer, then shot him in the stomach, so he'd die slow. Took 3 hours. Dutch sat there the entire time, eating a sandwich. He'd killed over 100 people by 1931. Shot a tax prosecutor point blank in a restaurant full of witnesses because the man asked too many questions. Even Lucky Luciano, the man who invented the modern mafia, thought Dutch was too crazy to control. But crazy made money, and Dutch's operation pulled in $20 million annually. Bootlegging, protection, murder for hire. He was untouchable until he looked at Harlem. $200,000 a week flowing through Stephanie's numbers operation. That's over $10 million a year. And it was all controlled by a black woman. Dutch couldn't stand it. Not the competition. The optics. February 3rd, 1931. Dutch sent 3 men to Stephanie's counting house on Lenox Avenue. The message was simple. Sell to us. Work for us. Or die. The 3 men sat across from Stephanie. Big men. Armed men. White men who'd never been told no by anyone, especially not by a woman. Stephanie was 5 feet tall, 110 pounds, 34 years old. She looked at them for 5 full seconds. Then she said one word. No. The lead enforcer, a man named Vincent Call, nicknamed Mad Dog Call because he'd once killed a child in a shootout and laughed about it, leaned forward. You understand who you're talking to? Dutch Schultz owns the Bronx. He owns the police. He owns the judges. You're a numbers runner in Harlem. You're nothing. Stephanie didn't blink. Then tell Dutch Schultz to come to Harlem himself. Tell him I said no. Tell him if he sends more men, I'll send them back in pieces. Call stood up, pulled his gun, pointed it at her face. You got 24 hours to reconsider. Stephanie smiled. You got 24 seconds to get out of my building before I have you killed in front of your own men. Call looked around. Stephanie's people had surrounded them. 12 men, all armed, all waiting. Call put the gun away. Left, reported back to Dutch. And Dutch Schultz, the man who'd never backed down from anyone, who'd gone to war with the entire Italian mob and won, made a decision. Burn Harlem to the ground. Kill everyone in Stephanie's operation, starting with her. But what Dutch didn't know was that Stephanie St. Clair had just made a decision too, and hers was colder, smarter, deadlier. She called Bumpy Johnson into her office that same night. War is coming. You ready? Bumpy nodded. Good, because we're not just fighting Dutch Schultz. We're destroying him. October 23rd, 1935. 10:15 p.m. Palace Chop House, Newark, New Jersey. Dutch Schultz sat in a booth with 3 of his top men. Otto Berman, his accountant. Abe Landau, his bodyguard. Bernard Rosenkrantz, his driver. They were eating dinner. Steak, potatoes, whiskey. At 10:20 p.m., 2 men walked in, both wearing long coats. They didn't say a word. They pulled out .38 revolvers. Started shooting. 5 bullets hit Dutch. Stomach, liver, intestines, shoulder, chest. Otto Berman. 3 bullets. Dead instantly. Abe Landau, 4 bullets. Died 12 hours later. Bernard Rosenkrantz. 2 bullets. Died 2 days later. Dutch Schultz, the man who'd killed over 100 people, who'd terrorized New York for a decade, who'd gone to war with Stephanie St. Clair and lost, died 22 hours after being shot. His last words, recorded by police at the hospital, were incoherent, rambling, fever dreams. But 3 names kept coming up. 2 men, 1 woman. The woman's name was Stephanie St. Clair, who ordered the hit. The commission, Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky, Frank Costello, the Italian mob bosses who decided Dutch was too reckless, too violent, too much heat. But here's the part history forgot. 3 weeks before the assassination, Stephanie St. Clair had a meeting with Meyer Lansky in a midtown Manhattan hotel. Nobody knows what was said. No records exist. But the timing? Suspicious. 2 days after Dutch's death, Stephanie sent a telegram to his lawyer, Dixie Davis. 9 words. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. She told a dead man, I told you so. Ice cold. You'd think this was her victory lap, that she'd retire rich and powerful. Finally safe. But you have no idea what happened next. Because Stephanie's war wasn't over. It was just beginning. And the betrayal that came next? It would come from the one person she never saw coming. November 1935. Dutch Schultz was dead. Stephanie St. Clair had won. Except she hadn't. Because 48 hours after Dutch's assassination, a black Lincoln pulled up outside Stephanie's brownstone on 137th Street. 3 men stepped out. Expensive suits, polished shoes, rings that cost more than most Harlem apartments. Italian men. They knocked. Politely. Stephanie opened the door. She knew who they were. Everyone in New York knew who they were. Lucky Luciano's people. The lead man, a Sicilian named Salvatore Maranzano Jr., smiled. Not a friendly smile. A business smile. Madam St. Clair, may we come in? Stephanie stepped aside. They entered, sat in her living room like they owned it. We represent Mr. Luciano and the commission. We want to personally congratulate you on your victory over Dutch Schultz. Very impressive. Stephanie said nothing, just waited. Mr. Luciano believes Harlem has great potential. The numbers racket you've built is remarkable, and he'd like to make you an offer. Here it comes, Stephanie thought. You continue running your operations. We provide protection, political connections, police cooperation. In exchange, we take 40% of gross revenue. Stephanie's face didn't change. And if I say no, Maranzano's smile disappeared. Then we take 100%, and you take nothing, except maybe a funeral. This was the problem with winning a war. You don't just defeat one enemy. You attract new ones, bigger ones, smarter ones. Dutch Schultz had been a psychopath, violent, unpredictable, easy to outmaneuver. Lucky Luciano was different. He was organized, strategic, patient. He'd invented the commission, the ruling body of the American mafia. He'd ended decades of mob wars by creating structure, rules, diplomacy, and he wanted Harlem. Stephanie looked at the 3 men in her living room. I need time to think. You have 72 hours. They stood, left. The door closed. Stephanie sat alone in her living room for a long time. She fought Dutch Schultz for 4 years. Lost friends, lost money, lost sleep, nearly lost her life. And now, 2 days after winning, she was facing the same threat all over again. Except this time, she couldn't win. Lucky Luciano controlled the police, controlled the judges, controlled the politicians. He had money Stephanie couldn't match, soldiers she couldn't fight, connections she couldn't break. And he was offering her a deal. Most people would have taken it. 60% of something was better than 100% of nothing. But Stephanie St. Clair wasn't most people. November 8, 1935. Stephanie called a meeting. Her entire organization, 43 people, runners, enforcers, accountants, managers, including Bumpy Johnson. She stood in front of them. Luciano made an offer. I'm turning it down. The room went silent. Bumpy spoke first. Queenie, that's suicide. Maybe. But I didn't build this empire to hand it over to the Italians. I didn't fight Dutch Schultz for 4 years just about a lucky Luciano. She looked around the room. Anyone who wants to leave, leave now. No hard feelings. No consequences. This is bigger than business. This is about pride. Nobody moved. Stephanie nodded. Then we fight. But here's what Stephanie didn't know. While she was preparing for war, Bumpy Johnson was having his own meeting, 3 blocks away, in a basement on 140th Street, with Lucky Luciano's people. December 1935. Stephanie started noticing things. Her runners were showing up late. Her enforcers were missing check-ins. Her accountants were making mistakes they'd never made before. Small things, easy to dismiss. But Stephanie hadn't survived this long by dismissing small things. January 1936. One of her policy banks got raided. Police took everything. Money, ledgers, betting slips. But here's the strange part. The cops knew exactly where to look, exactly when to hit, exactly which safe held the cash. Somebody told them. February 1936. 3 of Stephanie's top runners quit, all on the same day. No explanation, just walked away. 2 weeks later, they were working for the Italians. Stephanie called Bumpy into her office. We have a leak. Bumpy nodded. I'll find them. But Stephanie was watching him closely now. The way he avoided eye contact. The way his answers came too quickly. The way he kept checking his watch. She'd taught him everything. How to read people. How to spot deception. And now she was reading him. March 1936. Stephanie made a decision. She called a meeting. Just her and Bumpy. Nobody else. They met at her brownstone. Late night. Rain outside. Stephanie poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Slid one across the table. How long? Bumpy looked confused. How long what? How long have you been working with Luciano? The room went cold. Bumpy didn't answer right away. Just stared at the whiskey glass. Then he looked up. 3 months. Stephanie felt something break inside her chest. Not her heart. Something deeper. Trust. Partnership. Respect. Why? Because you can't win this. Queenie. Luciano's got the commission. He's got the cops. He's got the politicians. You keep fighting, you die. Simple as that. So you sold me out to save yourself. I sold you out to save you. Bumpy's voice was rising now. You think I wanted this? You taught me everything. You gave me a chance when nobody else would. But you're too proud to see what's in front of you. This war is over. You lost. Stephanie stood up slowly. Get out. Queenie, get out of my house. Get out of my organization. Get out of my life. Bumpy stood. Looked at her one last time. I'm sorry. No, you're not. You're scared. And that makes you weak. Bumpy left. The door closed. And Stephanie St. Clair, the woman who'd beaten Dutch Schultz, who'd built a multi-million-dollar empire from nothing, who'd made gangsters beg and politicians bow, sat alone in her living room and cried for the first time in 10 years. Not because she'd lost a war, because the one person she trusted had chosen survival over loyalty. And she understood finally that some battles can't be won. Not because you're not strong enough, because the people you're fighting alongside aren't willing to die for what you're fighting for. By April 1936, the Italians controlled Harlem's numbers racket. Bumpy Johnson became their chief enforcer. Made more money than he'd ever made with Stephanie. And Stephanie? She didn't disappear. Didn't retire quietly. Didn't fade away. What she did next shocked everyone. And I mean everyone. Drop a comment right now. Tell me honestly, do you think Bumpy betrayed Stephanie? Or did he make the only choice that kept him alive? Because this isn't black and white. This is the ugliest shade of gray you've ever seen. And if you've ever had someone you trusted choose themselves over you, you know exactly how this feels. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see how Stephanie got her revenge. Because trust me, she got it. And it was colder than anything Dutch Schultz or Lucky Luciano ever did. April 1936. Stephanie St. Clair had lost her empire, lost her partner, lost the war. But she still had one weapon nobody could take from her. The files. Remember those ledgers I mentioned at the beginning? The ones with every dirty cop, every crooked politician, every judge who'd taken a bribe. Stephanie never destroyed them. She'd been collecting evidence since 1922. 14 years of meticulous record-keeping. Names, dates, amounts, bank accounts, photographs, signed receipts, witness statements. She had it all, and it was locked in 3 separate locations across Harlem. Safety deposit boxes under fake names. Addresses only she knew. May 12, 1936. A Tammany Hall politician named Alderman James Murphy received a phone call at 11:47 p.m. Murphy had been taking bribes from Lucky Luciano for 2 years, protecting the Italian mob's interests in Harlem, killing investigations, fixing zoning laws, standard corruption. The voice on the phone was calm. Female, Alderman Murphy. This is Stephanie St. Clair. Murphy went cold. What do you want? I want you to remember August 14th, 1934. The $5,000 you took from Meyer Lansky to kill the investigation into the policy raid on 125th Street. I have the receipt, your signature, the bank transfer, everything. Murphy's hand started shaking. You're bluffing. Check your mailbox tomorrow morning. The line went dead. The next morning, Murphy found an envelope. Inside, a photocopy of the receipt, his signature clear as day, and a note. This is one of 47 pieces of evidence I have on you. Next time you vote on anything involving Harlem, remember who's watching. Murphy never took another bribe, never voted against Harlem interests. For the next 12 years, until he retired, he was Stephanie St. Clair's puppet. And he wasn't the only one. Between 1936 and 1938, Stephanie sent similar packages to 17 politicians, 23 police officers, and 11 judges. She didn't ask for money, didn't demand favors, just reminded them she was still there, still watching, still dangerous. Lucky Luciano controlled Harlem's numbers racket, but Stephanie St. Clair controlled the people who were supposed to stop him. It was psychological warfare, and it worked. June 1937. A police captain named Thomas O'Malley tried to raid one of Stephanie's remaining properties, a small boarding house she owned on 139th Street. The raid was scheduled for dawn, but at 2 a.m., O'Malley received a phone call. Captain O'Malley, do you remember your daughter's name? Sarah. She's 8 years old. Attends PS 186 on West 145th Street. Gets dropped off every morning at 7:53 a.m. O'Malley's blood froze. If you touch my daughter, I'm not threatening your daughter, Captain. I'm reminding you that I know where she is. Every day, every moment. And if you raid my property tomorrow morning, everyone in New York will know about the $12,000 you stole from the evidence locker in 1934. The New York Times will get copies. Your wife will get copies. Your daughter will read about it when she's older. The raid never happened. This is what people didn't understand about Stephanie St. Clair. She didn't need an empire. She didn't need soldiers. She just needed leverage. And she had leverage on everyone who mattered. But here's the mystery that haunts historians to this day. What happened to those files? Stephanie died in 1969. Heart attack, alone in her apartment on 7th Avenue. She was 72 years old. When her estate was settled, investigators searched everywhere. Her apartment, her safety deposit boxes, her lawyer's office. Nothing. The files had disappeared. Some people think Bumpy Johnson stole them before she died, used them to protect himself after she was gone. Others think Lucky Luciano's people found them, destroyed them to erase evidence. Some historians believe Stephanie destroyed them herself. A final act of control, taking her secrets to the grave. But here's the theory that keeps me up at night. What if the files still exist? What if they're sitting in some forgotten archive? Some storage unit rented under a fake name in 1938? Some basement in Harlem that nobody's touched in 80 years? Because if those files exist, they're not just historical documents. They're dynamite. Names of politicians who went on to become governors, senators, maybe higher. Names of judges who shaped American law for decades. Names of police officers whose families still live in New York. If those files ever surface, they won't just rewrite Harlem's history. They'll rewrite American history. Think about it. Right now, someone could be sitting on the most explosive collection of political corruption evidence in the 20th century, and they don't even know it. Or maybe they do know, and they're waiting for the right moment to use it. Comment right now. Type receipts if you think those files are still out there somewhere. Type gone if you think Stephanie destroyed them. Because this isn't just about history. This is about power. And power doesn't disappear. It just changes hands. Hit that subscribe button if you want to know what happened to Stephanie in her final years. Because there's one more twist to this story. One more moment that proves Stephanie St. Clair was never, ever to be underestimated. Even when everyone thought she was finished. What she did in 1969, 3 months before she died, will blow your mind. It involves the one person she swore she'd never forgive, Bumpy Johnson. 1969. Stephanie St. Clair was 72 years old, living alone in a rent-controlled apartment on 7th Avenue. No empire, no soldiers, no headlines. Most people thought she was dead already. But 3 months before her actual death, something happened that reminded everyone who Stephanie St. Clair really was. July 14th, 1969, 3:22 p.m. A black Cadillac pulled up outside her building. The door opened. A man stepped out. Bumpy Johnson. He was 62 years old now, still running Harlem's underworld, still working with the Italian families, still powerful, still feared. He walked into Stephanie's building, climbed 3 flights of stairs, knocked on her door. Stephanie opened it. For 10 full seconds, they just stared at each other. 33 years since their last conversation. The conversation where she'd told him to get out, where he'd chosen survival over loyalty. Bumpy spoke first. "Can I come in?" Stephanie stepped aside. They sat in her small living room. Furniture from the 1940s. Photographs on the walls. A life frozen in time. "Why are you here, Ellsworth?" Nobody had called him that in decades. His real name, the name from before he became Bumpy Johnson. "I'm dying. Congestive heart failure. Doctors give me 6 months." Stephanie didn't react. Just waited. "I want to say I'm sorry. For what I did. For choosing them over you." Stephanie looked at him for a long time. "You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you're dying before you could make it right." Bumpy nodded slowly. "Maybe, but I need you to know something. Everything I learned, everything I became, that was you. You taught me how to think, how to survive, how to win, and then you used those lessons against me, because you taught me too well." Stephanie almost smiled. "Almost? What do you want, Ellsworth? Forgiveness? Absolution? You think showing up here 3 decades later makes us even?" "No. I think showing up here proves I never forgot. That you were right. About everything." He reached into his jacket, pulled out an envelope, placed it on the coffee table. Inside, deeds to 3 properties in Harlem, worth approximately $500,000 in 1969 money. All in Stephanie's name. "What is this?" "Your cut. From 1936 to now. 40% of everything I made working with the Italians. I kept track. Every year. Every dollar. This is what you were owed." Stephanie stared at the envelope. "You think money fixes betrayal?" "No, but it's all I have left to give." Stephanie didn't touch the envelope. "Get out. Queenie, you came here to feel better about dying. To tell yourself you made amends. But you didn't. You just reminded me that even after 33 years, you're still the same. Still trying to buy your way out of guilt." Bumpy stood slowly. Looked at her one last time. "I loved you. Not the way a man loves a woman. The way a son loves a mother. You were the only person who ever believed in me. And you were the only person I ever trusted completely. And you destroyed that." Bumpy walked to the door. Stopped. Turned back. "For what it's worth, I regretted it every single day." "Good. You should have." Bumpy left. The envelope stayed on the coffee table. 6 weeks later, July 7th, 1968, Bumpy Johnson died of a heart attack in a Harlem restaurant, surrounded by people, Famous, legendary, the subject of countless stories. Stephanie St. Clair attended his funeral, stood in the back, didn't speak to anyone. When they lowered his casket into the ground, she dropped something onto it, a single playing card, the ace of spades, the same card she'd sent to Dutch Schultz's lawyer in 1935, the same card that meant you lost. Nobody understood the gesture except the old-timers, the ones who remembered when Stephanie St. Clair ran Harlem, when she made gangsters beg and politicians bow. October 1969. Stephanie St. Clair suffered a massive heart attack in her apartment. She was alone. By the time neighbors found her, she'd been dead for 2 days. Her funeral had 47 people. No politicians. No gangsters. No headlines. The New York Times ran a 3-sentence obituary on page 37. Misspelled her name. But here's what they found when they cleared out her apartment. The envelope Bumpy had left, still sealed, never opened, still sitting on the coffee table where he'd placed it 3 months earlier. She'd never touched the money, never forgave him, never let him buy his way out. Even in death, Stephanie St. Clair refused to bow, and that's the tragedy of this story. Bumpy Johnson got movies, television shows, documentaries. Forrest Whitaker played him. Denzel Washington played him. But the woman who made him, the woman who built the empire he inherited, the woman who went to war with Dutch Schultz and won, history almost forgot her name. She fought the most violent gangsters in America, fought corrupt politicians, fought racist systems designed to destroy her, and she won over and over again. But because she was a black woman in the 1930s, because she didn't die in a hail of bullets, because she lived long enough to become invisible, the world moved on without her. Until now. Comment right now. Tell me honestly, have you ever heard of Stephanie St. Clair before this video? Because if you haven't, that proves exactly what I'm talking about. History erased her. Deliberately. Systematically. And if we don't tell her story, if we don't remember her name, she stays erased. Hit that subscribe button if you believe Stephanie St. Clair deserves the same recognition as Bumpy Johnson, the same movies, the same respect, because she was smarter, tougher, and more strategic than any gangster of her era, male or female, black or white. Share this video. Make it go viral. Because Stephanie St. Clair beat Dutch Schultz, outlived Lucky Luciano, refused to forgive Bumpy Johnson even on his deathbed, and the world needs to know her name. Stephanie St. Clair, Madam Queen of Harlem, the woman who made gangsters beg, never forgotten again. Stephanie St. Clair wasn't just a gangster. She was a revolutionary. A 5-foot-tall black woman from Martinique who arrived in America with $10 and built a multi-million-dollar empire in the most racist city in the country during the most racist era in history. She went to war with Dutch Schultz, the most violent mobster in America, and she won. She outsmarted Lucky Luciano, the man who invented organized crime as we know it, and she survived. She taught Bumpy Johnson everything he knew, and even when he betrayed her, even when she lost her empire, she never bowed, never begged, never broke, because power isn't about size. It's not about gender. It's not about how many soldiers you have or how much money you control. Power is about intelligence, strategy, the willingness to stand alone when everyone else runs. Stephanie St. Clair had that power, and she used it to protect Harlem for 2 decades. But history erased her, wrote her out of the story, gave all the credit to the men who learned from her. And that's why we're here, to tell the stories history tried to bury, to remember the names they wanted us to forget. Stephanie St. Clair, Madam Queen of Harlem, the woman who made Bumpy Johnson beg. Now I want to hear from you. Comment Queen right now if you think Stephanie St. Clair deserves a full Hollywood movie, because she does. Her story is bigger, smarter, and more dramatic than anything we've seen on screen. Comment Bumpy if you think he made the right choice in 1936. If you think survival justified betrayal. Because I want to know where you stand on this. Was he a traitor or a realist? Comment Files if you believe those records still exist somewhere, hidden in a storage unit, buried in an archive, sitting in someone's attic waiting to explode, because that mystery haunts me. And here's the big one. Who else from this era deserves their story told? What other forgotten names should we cover next? Drop them in the comments. I'm reading every single one, because this channel exists for one reason: to uncover the stories they don't teach in school, the people who changed history but got erased from it, the truth that's too uncomfortable, too complicated, too real for mainstream media. If this story blew your mind, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because we're dropping untold true crime stories like this every single week. Stories about power, betrayal, survival, the kind of stories that make you question everything you thought you knew. And if you want to know what really happened to Bumpy Johnson after Stephanie died, how he spent his final years, the enemies he made, the regrets he carried, that story is coming next week. And trust me, it's darker than anything we covered today. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss it, because what Bumpy did in his final years will make you rethink everything about loyalty, power, and legacy in the underworld. Stephanie St. Clair, the woman who refused a bow. Remember her name. See you in the next one.